something out there isn't behaving like it should. They say comets are simple icy wanderers that melt, spin, and fall apart under the sun's warmth. But this one breaks all the rules. If you love mysteries of deep space and the unexplainable, make sure you subscribe, because tonight we're diving into one of the strangest stories ever recorded in modern astronomy. A silent giant, a body so big it bends light differently, is moving through our solar system. Scientists call it 3-Eye Atlas. Some call it a comet. Others whisper a different word, Mothership. It came from nowhere, faint blur first spotted beyond Jupiter's reach, gliding with the calm patience of something that knows exactly where it's going. Telescopes locked on, data streamed in, and right away, things stopped making sense. You see, when a normal comet approaches the sun, the ice boils off. The gas jets act like rocket thrusters. Tiny ones, yes, but powerful enough to nudge its orbit. Every known comet wobbles just a little as it heats. But not this one. The Hubble telescope recorded 150 kilograms of material blasting off it every single second. That's 3 full-grown people per second. Yet 3-Eye Atlas never flinched. It didn't slow down, it didn't drift. It moved as though gravity itself had already agreed to get out of its way. Harvard's Avi Loeb did the math. For an object to shrug off that much thrust, it would need to weigh 33 billion tons. Let that sink in. That's more than 1,000 times heavier than the interstellar comet Borisov. Borisov was about the size of a football field. 3-Eye Atlas is closer to the width of Manhattan Island, a floating city made of what exactly? The numbers didn't add up. And then came the tail. Normally, a comet's tail streams away from the sun. Solar wind pushes dust and gas outward, forming that graceful streak across the stars. But this object's glow was facing the wrong direction toward the Sunday. Astronomers stared at their screens and blinked. It was like seeing a cat with its tail growing out of his forehead. The strange behavior didn't stop there. Spectrographs picked up traces of nickel in the cloud surrounding it. That alone wasn't shocking. Comets can have metal. But nickel without iron? That's impossible in nature. Here on Earth, that only happens when someone or something refines it. Industrial-grade nickel. The kind used in spacecraft hulls and electronic shielding. Suddenly, what had looked like dust began to resemble debris, maybe even exhaust. Dr. Loeb hesitated before saying it aloud, but once he did, it couldn't be unsaid. If something behaves like a machine, we should at least consider that it might be one. NASA's reports stayed careful, conservative, but the numbers were public. Every telescope that looked saw the same impossible calm, the same forward-facing plume. It was as though the object was breaking not from thrust, but from design. Then someone noticed something else, a line on a star map. They traced the trajectory of 3-Eye Atlas backward all the way out of the solar system and realized it came from almost the exact patch of sky where, in 1977, the WOW signal was detected. A radio transmission so perfect, so alien, that the scientist who saw it circled it and simply wrote, "Wow." That signal never repeated. No one ever found the source. Until now, maybe. The odds of coincidence? Less than 1%. You could almost feel astronomers shift uneasily in their chairs, the way someone does when they realize the thing they've been calling random might actually be watching them back. As the object drifted closer, Mars lay directly in its path 18 million miles at nearest approach. NASA's orbiters prepared to take a look. The high-rise camera, capable of resolving a single boulder from orbit, would soon point at the object. If even 1 pixel glowed brighter than it should, it could reveal its true size and maybe its nature. But before that could happen, the sun got in the way. The object would swing behind it at the perfect moment, hidden, invisible from Earth. For several weeks, no one on our planet would be able to see it. If you wanted to disappear, you couldn't plan it better. Was that chance? Or was that choreography? Avi Loeb called it a potential black swan event, a low probability moment with world-shifting consequences. He even wrote to the United Nations, asking them to create a committee for interstellar objects, because soon the new Vera Rubin Observatory would begin scanning the sky, finding 1 interstellar visitor every few months. And if even one of them wasn't a rock, but a machine, our entire civilization would have to learn a new rule book overnight. He compared humanity to ants on a sidewalk. If a biker rolls past, the ants might feel the rumble, see a shadow, and then it's gone. They can't comprehend the rider, the bike, or the road itself. They can't stop it. They can't talk to it. They can only look up and wonder. We might be those ants. And the thing passing above us might be something so far beyond us that even calling it technology is like calling thunder music. That's the calm horror in all of this. Not the fear of invasion, but the realization that we may already be surrounded by visitors we can't even recognize as visitors. As 3-Eye Atlas slipped behind the sun, radio telescopes around the world turned their dishes toward the spot where it vanished. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew what they were hoping and dreading to hear. A signal, a voice, a message. For now, there's only silence. But silence can mean many things in space. Sometimes it means distance. Sometimes it means waiting. And sometimes it means listening. When 3-Eye Atlas vanished behind the sun, the world didn't notice. Most people were busy scrolling, sleeping, working, living their lives under the same sky, unaware that something the size of a city had just disappeared behind our star. But the scientists were watching and waiting. You see, when an object goes behind the sun, it isn't just hidden, it's shielded from observation by every telescope on Earth. That means no one can track its movement. No one can verify its speed, its spin, or whether it even came back out the other side. In those weeks of silence, 3-Eye Atlas was free. Free from our gaze. Free from every instrument pointed its way. If it wanted to change course, it could, and we would never know. When it finally re-emerged, something strange had changed. Its glow had brightened not evenly, but in pulses, as if the object itself were breathing. The forward tail, that bizarre jet of light pointing toward the sun, was even longer. It was no longer faint and misty. It had structure. Imagine a luminous filament stretching for hundreds of thousands of miles, glowing like a stretched thread of molten glass. Some astronomers said it looked like a solar sail catching light. Others said it looked more like plasma, organized, controlled, moving with purpose. NASA's instruments picked up an unusual electromagnetic echo. Not a signal, exactly, more like a hum. A soft background vibration, repeating every few minutes. It could have been interference. But interference doesn't usually have rhythm. At Harvard, Avi Loeb's office light stayed on late into the night. He began sketching possibilities on the whiteboard, the equations for gravitational capture, radiation pressure, and solar sail propulsion. Each time he finished a line of math, he paused, rubbed his forehead, and stared at the numbers as if waiting for them to apologize. They never did. Every calculation said the same thing. For 3I Atlas to behave as it does, it must be either impossibly heavy or impossibly intelligent. And then came the nickel cloud. By now, the object's halo of dust and vapor had expanded, spreading through the interplanetary medium like a soft metallic fog. Spectral readings showed bright spikes of nickel refined, pure, unaccompanied by iron. That is not how nature works. In nature, nickel and iron are twins. They form together, die together, travel together through supernova explosions and cosmic collisions. Finding one without the other is like finding salt without sodium. It shouldn't happen, unless someone separated it. Here on Earth, nickel is used in spacecraft alloys for shielding, electronics, and thermal resistance. If 3I Atlas was shedding pure nickel, it could mean only one thing. Whatever it was made of, it was built with intent. Still, scientists argued, nature can surprise us, they said. It can build strange things we don't yet understand. And that's true. But every natural thing obeys natural laws, gravity, chemistry, motion. 3I Atlas seemed to obey none. Some wondered if it was hollow, a shell made to look like a comet, moving through space as a disguise. Others suggested it might be ancient. A probe launched millions of years ago, now drifting on autopilot, still functioning after civilizations long gone had turned to dust. There were even whispers, quiet ones, at conferences, in late-night calls between observatories, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the first. Maybe Oumuamua, the cigar-shaped visitor from a few years ago, had been the scout, and 3I Atlas was the ship that followed. If that were true, then it wasn't coming to visit. It was coming to check on something. The further astronomers dug, the stranger it became. Radar echoes hinted that its surface wasn't rough or chaotic like ice or rock. It was smooth unnaturally so, with flat planes that reflected light like polished metal. Comets don't have symmetry. Machines often do. But it was the tail that haunted everyone. Comets have tails because the sun pushes material away, 3-eye atlas's tail, however, pointed directly at the sun as though the object were pulling itself toward the light instead of being pushed from it. It's a reversal of logic, a mirror of what should be, like a bird flapping backward against the wind. Some scientists called it a coincidence. Others stopped giving interviews entirely. And a few started speaking more carefully, choosing their words like people walking across thin ice. Because if this really was a technological craft, then someone, somewhere, built it. And if they built it, then they might know we're watching. In one private interview, Loeb compared the experience to being in a forest at night. You shine a flashlight into the darkness. You see trees, mist, movement. But then, for a split second, something shiny flashes back, and you realize you're not the only one with a light. That was 3-eye Atlas. The forest had flashed back. By October, its trajectory placed it perfectly between Earth, Mars, and the Sun. A geometry so precise that even the smallest deviation would have sent it spiraling off course. Instead, it glided smoothly through the gravitational minefield, as if the laws of physics were familiar territory. Its timing, its path, its alignment, all too perfect to be random. And then it began to rotate, not chaotically, but deliberately one revolution every few hours. Like a satellite adjusting its orientation to catch the right light. Radio telescopes detected microbursts of radio noise each time it faced a certain direction. Faint, regular, but real. No one could decode them. Some said they were natural emissions from its ionized gas. Others thought they were something else. Something patent. For now, the official reports call them anomalies. But among astronomers, a new word began to circulate, whispered first in emails, then on podcasts, then late at night in university halls. Mothership, a word loaded with fear and fascination, myth and mathematics, all at once. And maybe that's why 3-eye Atlas feels so haunting. Because deep down, everyone knows something that size, that calm, that ancient, doesn't just pass through your neighborhood by mistake. There's a phrase scientists rarely use too perfect. But that's exactly how Avi Loeb described the alignment between 3-eye Atlas and one of the most mysterious signals in human history. The year was 1977. In an observatory in Ohio, the night was quiet, just the steady hum of a radio telescope called the Big Ear. It was scanning the heavens, listening for whispers in the cosmic static. Then, suddenly, a spike, a pulse so sharp and narrow-banded, sliced through the noise like a blade of light. It lasted 72 seconds. No satellites, no aircraft, no known source. The astronomer on duty, Jerry Eman, stared at the printout, circled the sequence of numbers, and wrote one word in the margin. Wow. The name stuck. The wow signal became legend, the closest thing to a verified alien transmission ever recorded. And then, nothing. It never repeated. The coordinates faded into mystery. Until now, when Loeb traced 3-eye Atlas's incoming trajectory backward, something froze him mid-calculation. The path pointed almost exactly to the same small patch of sky where the wow signal had come from a span of only 9 degrees. 9 degrees out of billions of possible directions. Coincidence? Maybe, but probability says otherwise. A random overlap like that has less than a 1% chance of happening. That's not noise, that's intent. Think about it. A signal strong enough to travel across light years, and decades later, an interstellar object appearing from the same region of space, following the same line of approach. If these two events are connected, then the message didn't just come from somewhere. It came before something. A warning, a beacon, a transmission saying, "We're coming." Loeb didn't say those words in public, he's too careful for that, but you can feel them between the lines of his research papers. The unspoken tension of a man staring into the unknown, trying to make the math behave. He urged radio observatories worldwide to point their dishes toward 3i Atlas to listen again. So far, there's only silence, but even silence in space is data. It tells you where not to look, and sometimes it tells you why to keep looking. Because maybe the signal wasn't meant for us at all. Maybe it was meant for it. When 3i Atlas slipped behind the sun, something strange happened on Earth. A faint burst of electromagnetic noise echoed through multiple radio arrays, synchronized across continents. It was so brief that most systems dismissed it as static. But timing analysis showed the echo matched the exact moment the object crossed the solar limb, the point where it disappeared from every telescope's view. An echo from the void, like a whisper caught between frequencies. You could almost imagine it as two signals overlapping, one human, one not colliding for a fraction of a second. It's the kind of data that haunts scientists, the kind that keeps them awake at night, replaying numbers over and over, asking themselves if they're looking at physics or communication. When 3i Atlas emerged again weeks later, its light had changed. Not brighter, not dimmer different, polarized in a pattern that no comet has ever shown. Its glow scattered like structured metal, not dust, and still that strange forward-facing plume like an engine pointed toward the Sunday. It was as if it had used the sun not as an obstacle but as cover, a blind spot, a maneuver window. Loeb proposed a thought experiment. What if this was a planned gravity assist, a slingshot, a way to adjust its velocity without using visible thrust? And more disturbingly, what if the timing of that assist had been chosen specifically for when Earth would be on the opposite side of the sun, unable to see? To any casual observer, that might sound paranoid. But in orbital mechanics, precision is everything, and 3i Atlas timing was too precise. The object moved as though it knew where our eyes were and chose to look away only when we could not look back. If you've ever stood alone at night, staring into the sky, you know the feeling, the quiet hum of something larger than comprehension. We spend centuries building machines to listen, to see, to understand. But what if what's out there is already listening back? What if this object isn't just passing through, but passing messages? As it traveled, minor bursts of radio interference spiked in synchronization with its rotation. Short, regular, mechanical. They didn't match solar activity, nor cosmic rays. Just short rhythmic flickers. Every time 3I Atlas turned a certain face toward Earth. Not long enough to decode. Just long enough to remind us it was still there. It's easy to dismiss these things, we always do. We tell ourselves that the universe is indifferent, that the cosmos doesn't care about our tiny blue world. But what if that's wrong? What if the cosmos is full of watchers, not gods or monsters, but travelers, and one of them just decided to come closer? By late October, something else began to change. Solar observatories reported localized magnetic fluctuations on the sun's surface, perfectly timed with the object's perihelion, its closest approach. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the sun itself was responding to a foreign magnetic field, something large enough to make the solar wind ripple. For a few hours, the solar corona shimmered differently, like static on a screen, and then it was gone. But when NASA's probes reviewed the telemetry, a faint frequency spike showed up again low, repeating, buried in the noise. And it matched, almost perfectly, the numerical ratio embedded in the original wow signal. That's when even the skeptics went quiet. If 3I Atlas truly came from the same region of space, and if its emissions carry the same signature as the wow signal, then we might be witnessing the first evidence of a technology that predates our civilization by millions of years. A messenger crossing the interstellar dark, running on principles we can't yet name. And the most unsettling part? Its course doesn't end at the Sunday. It continues inward toward the plane of our inner planets. No one knows where it will go next. Some models show it bending toward Venus, others toward Earth. A few show it leaving entirely as though its purpose here is complete. But one model, the quiet one few talk about, publicly predicts something else. That 3I Atlas will slow down. Not because of drag, not because of gravity, but because it chooses to. The next part of this story begins when humanity realizes that the object may not be leaving after all that it might be waiting. For weeks, 3I Atlas did something no interstellar visitor had ever done before. It stopped changing. Its brightness plateaued. Its trajectory steadied. Its radio emissions, those faint, rhythmic flickers, began to repeat. Every 7 hours. Exactly. Not 6 hours and 58 minutes. Not 7 hours and 5. Perfectly 7. As if ticking to a clock that no human built. When astronomers charted the data, they noticed something chilling the timing of those pulses, aligned almost perfectly with the rotation of Mars. Every time the red planet completed a turn, 3I Atlas responded with a whisper. It wasn't communication in any form we know, but it was coordination. Some called it coincidence. Others called it surveillance. In mid-November, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter finally turned its camera toward the area of sky where 3I Atlas should have been. HiRISE, the most powerful imaging system ever sent to another world, snapped a burst of high-resolution photos. At first glance, the image looked ordinary, a faint streak, barely brighter than the background stars. But when they enhanced it, a pattern emerged. The object wasn't spherical. It wasn't even irregular like a rock. It had symmetry, long, tapering edges, a geometry too smooth, too even, too deliberate. The official data release called it an elongated structure of undetermined origin. Unofficially, one analyst described it as a city block wrapped in shadow. But that wasn't the strangest part. It wasn't reflecting sunlight like a solid object should. It was absorbing it. Normally, a comet's surface sparkles as ice and dust reflect the solar glare. 3I Atlas appeared matte, a surface that drank in light instead of bouncing it away. To the instruments, it was as though the object existed slightly out of phase, visible, yet somehow distant from the space it occupied. One researcher compared it to looking at your reflection in a dark window and realizing the face looking back isn't yours. On Earth, the news barely made a ripple. NASA's press statements were cautious, clinical, designed to keep panic off the table. But behind closed doors, debates grew heated. If this was truly artificial, what did it mean? If it wasn't, why was it breaking every rule of astrophysics we thought we understood? Dr. Loeb was asked whether it might be transmitting. He didn't deny it. He simply said, "We haven't been able to prove that it isn't." That's not reassurance. That's confession. And still, the object waited. No acceleration. No new outgassing jets. Just a silent drift like something observing, recording, or perhaps simply resting. The strange periodic signals continue. Observatories from Chile to Hawaii to South Africa picked them up, faint but regular pulses that matched not only Mars' rotation but Earth's day-night cycle as well. When plotted on a 3D model of the solar system, the pattern formed a shape, a spiral. Not random, not chaotic. A repeating geometric curve that mirrored the golden ratio, the same mathematical pattern found in galaxies, hurricanes, and seashells. Nature loves spirals, but this spiral was synchronized to us. At this point, the conversation began to shift from what is it to what does it want? For the first time, the possibility that this object had intent was whispered in scientific circles. Intent changes everything. If 3I Atlas was natural, it was a miracle of coincidence. If it wasn't, then we were no longer alone. Loeb published a paper, calm, methodical, deliberately non-sensational. But between the lines, you could sense the gravity of what he was saying. This object behaves in a manner inconsistent with natural interstellar debris. We must consider the possibility of artificial origin. He called it a technological relic, a phrase both elegant and terrifying, because relic implies age. It implies something old, older than us, older than our planet. And the more he studied, the more it seemed true. The isotopic composition of the gases around the object didn't match our solar system. They were older, pre-solar, forged in a star that died before the sun was even born. 3. Atlas wasn't just from another system. It was from another epoch. If it's a relic, then who left it? And what could last that long drifting between the stars without breaking apart? The answer Loeb proposed was chillingly simple. Only something that was meant to. By late November, 3I Atlas began to drift again, not away, but inward. A gentle curve, like a slow-motion dive toward the inner solar system. The models struggled to explain it. No thrust, no visible energy output. And yet, it was moving against gravity as if carried by an invisible hand. That's when a new theory surfaced, one that felt more science fiction than science. What if it wasn't moving at all? What if space was moving around it? Think of a fish in a current staying perfectly still as the water flows past. If the object was bending space-time locally, it wouldn't need engines. It could stay perfectly stationary in its own field while the solar system rotated around it. That theory would rewrite physics. But it would also explain why it looked so calm, so steady, so patient. And then, as if to underline that very thought, it blinked. One pulse, stronger than all the others. Every radio dish on Earth caught it a frequency spike lasting less than 2 seconds. Then, silence. When the data was decoded, it wasn't random. The pulse carried a modulation not binary, not Morse, but structured, mathematically precise. The ratio embedded within it matched a constant that appears everywhere in nature, 1.618, the golden ratio. The same pattern seen in galaxies, in seashells, in DNA. It wasn't just watching us anymore. It was speaking in the language of creation itself. When that data hit Harvard, Loeb reportedly stared at it for nearly an hour without saying a word. Then he said quietly, "It's aware." He didn't mean consciousness in the human sense, not thought or emotion. He meant awareness of observation. That the object wasn't just visible, it was responding to being seen. The observer effect scaled up to cosmic proportions. The universe, perhaps. Noticing that, we had finally noticed it. The next morning, the sun flared. A massive coronal ejection rippled through space, heading straight for the object. And 3I Atlas, the unmoving, unflinching giant, responded. Its halo brightened, its forward tail shifted direction, and it seemed to brace itself. When the solar wave hit, it didn't scatter. It absorbed the impact and glowed brighter than before. No natural body reacts like that. It was as if it was feeding something ancient, something patient. Something that doesn't just travel through systems, it studies them. And now, it's watching ours. By December, the silence had started to feel like a presence of its own. 3I. Atlas was no longer just a distant curiosity. It had become a rumor that reached every corner of the scientific world. Not an official discovery. Not a threat, but a shadow, an awareness that something vast, deliberate, and inexplicable was sitting quietly within our neighborhood of space. At NASA, late-night meetings became routine. No one called them emergency sessions. They didn't have to. When a 10 billion ton object behaves like it's thinking, you don't need the word emergency. You just keep the lights on and stop pretending you're in control. The European Space Agency, meanwhile, noticed something strange in their deep space relay data. Tiny fluctuations in signal strength synchronized with the moment's 3-eye atlas pulsed. They were subtle, barely measurable, but they were too rhythmic to be coincidence. As though every time the object blinked, it caused a faint echo in the electromagnetic noise surrounding Earth. For a brief moment, it was as if the entire planet was breathing in sync with something ancient, unseen, and patient. When Loeb's team re-examined the pulse signature, they found something new, not just the golden ratio, but a second pattern hidden underneath. It wasn't random static. It was repetition with intent. A wave inside a wave, like an echo encoded in light. And when they slowed it down, a mathematical rhythm emerged. The same harmonic sequence found in hydrogen's atomic structure. Hydrogen, the simplest element in the universe. The first language of matter. To Loeb, it felt like the object was saying, "I understand your physics." That wasn't proof of intelligence. But it was proof of awareness. And awareness at a cosmic scale is terrifying. Then came the first leak. A technician working at the Arecibo radio array posted a brief message to an encrypted astronomy forum. Signal confirmed. Source, Atlas. The post was deleted within minutes, but not before screenshots spread like wildfire through Reddit, Twitter, and underground science channels. Within days, number Atlas signal was trending. Conspiracy channels claimed it was transmitting coordinates. Skeptics said it was just electromagnetic interference. But quietly, behind the noise, private observatories began turning their dishes toward the coordinates, and they all saw it. A faint but steady hum buried deep in the cosmic background, pulsing every 7 hours. That same 7-hour pattern now echoed across 3 continents. It was global, it was real, and it wasn't fading. By mid-December, governments began locking down data. NASA servers went offline for maintenance. The European Space Data Network suddenly restricted access to its public telemetry feeds. For the first time in decades, amateur astronomers realized they were the only ones still watching the sky without filters. And they started to notice something else. 3-eye Atlas wasn't alone anymore. A small object, fainter, faster, appeared to detach from its forward halo. At first, they thought it was debris, but then it slowed down and held position, just hovering there, a fragment of light steady against the solar wind, moving in perfect synchrony with the main body. The community dubbed it Atlas B. The pattern repeated days later, another small fragment peeling away, then stabilizing in formation. Then another. Soon there were 4. 4 faint lights orbiting the parent object like moons around a planet that had never existed before. They weren't tumbling. They were stationary. And every 7 hours, the same pose, main object first, then the 4 smaller ones, one by one, in perfect rhythm, as if answering a roll call. It was no longer behaving like a comet. It was behaving like a fleet. In Massachusetts, Loeb's Galileo Project observatories started tracking optical signatures around Earth's upper atmosphere. For months, they'd been looking for smaller probes. If the larger object was a mothership, logic said it might deploy Scout. And in the weeks following 3I Atlas's perihelion, the number of unidentified high atmospheric glints increased by 38%. Objects that entered from deep space slowed dramatically and simply stayed. No heat signatures, no re-entry trails, just silent reflections caught for seconds at a time, then gone. The pattern matched predictions, and Loeb's private report used 3 words that chilled everyone who read them. Deployment phase confirmed. Meanwhile, seismographs across South America, Africa, and Australia began picking up a faint rhythmic tremor. Too weak to be tectonic, too consistent to be natural. Every 7 hours, a soft hum at the edge of detection, as if the planet itself was resonating with the same invisible pulse that filled the sky. The media stayed quiet, but the whispers grew. Theories spread faster than facts, some claiming the object was mining data from the solar wind, others saying it was sending signals through the Earth itself. And still, through it all, 3I Atlas waited silent, massive, watching. No one knew if it was a weapon, a messenger, or something older than either concept. All they knew was that the longer it stayed, the less it felt like a visitor, and the more it felt like it had always been here. By Christmas, the world's major space agencies had gone completely silent. Press releases stopped. NASA's social media accounts posted nothing but archived photos. ESA staff were told not to discuss external phenomena. And yet, amateur astronomers continue to track the object's position in real time, its pulse, its fragments, and its unexplainable steadiness. Then came one final anomaly, a faint burst of light captured by a telescope in New Zealand, not from 3I Atlas itself, but from the region of space directly behind it. A ripple, as if the fabric of space itself flexed. The light distorted, bent for half a second, then normalized. The data suggested one thing. Something had passed behind 3I Atlas. Something bigger. Humanity had been watching the object for almost a year. But now, the unsettling truth was becoming clear. 3I Atlas might not be the traveler. It might be the beacon, a marker, a signal flare in the dark, not for us, but for something else. Something that was coming. By the start of the new year, something changed. Not out there, in here. Satellites began losing synchronization. GPS constellations drifted off by fractions of a second, tiny errors that shouldn't have happened all at once. At first, engineers thought it was a software glitch. Then it spread across multiple systems, across multiple countries. Every 7 hours, just like before, the pulses from 3I Atlas weren't just being received anymore. They were interacting. Every time the object sent its signal, Earth's electromagnetic field fluttered, subtle, measurable like an invisible hand brushing across a drumhead. And that's when the strange noises began. Across the northern hemisphere, radio operators, shortwave hobbyists, and deep-sea communication relays all reported the same sound. A low-frequency hum. A vibration so deep it couldn't be heard, only felt. Old antennas picked it up first, analog systems that hadn't been active in decades, suddenly coming alive with whispers. The hum wasn't random. It had rhythm. It followed the same pattern as before, 7-hour intervals, each lasting 56 seconds. 56, the exact duration of the original wow signal from 1977. The universe was replaying itself. At the Galileo Project headquarters, Avi Loeb stared at the latest readouts. He had spent his life arguing for rational explanations. Black holes, comets, radiation pressure. But this was different. The data felt intentional. The pulses were now modulated, tiny variations in frequency, spaced apart in prime numbers. Nature doesn't count in primes, he said quietly to his team. Intelligence does. They stared at him, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. On January 8th, a private satellite owned by a telecommunications company captured something extraordinary. As it passed over the Pacific, its imaging sensors briefly locked onto 3I Atlas. For the first time, the object wasn't still. It rotated, slowly, deliberately. As it turned, its forward-facing glow intensified, not blinding, but organized. Rows of faint lights along its surface, blinking in symmetrical sequence, like windows across a colossal dark ship. Every astronomer who saw the data said the same thing. That's not reflection. Light doesn't move like that by chance. It moved like a message. Then came the blackout. For 13 minutes, the satellite's feed went completely dark. Not static, not noise, just absence. And when the connection returned, the onboard clock was off by exactly 7 minutes' time missing, erased. The engineers dismissed it as a power anomaly. But when they checked the rest of the satellite network, they found the same gap synchronized across multiple systems. For 13 minutes, the entire global satellite grid had blinked in unison. At the same time, deep space telescopes picked up a narrow beam transmission emanating from near 3I Atlas. It wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed past us toward the outer edge of the solar system, as if the object wasn't calling home, but calling something closer. For days, scientists scrambled to decode the signal. It wasn't in any known data format, but its structure was crystalline repeating geometries of numbers, like an architectural blueprint written in mathematics. Within the pattern was a curve, a spiral, again. But this one was different. It matched the orbital ratio between Earth and Jupiter. 2 worlds, 2 points, 2 halves of a single equation. To Loeb, it meant one thing. We're part of the message now. By mid-January, smaller observatories began reporting faint flashes near Jupiter's orbit reflections that appeared, vanished, then appeared again, perfectly aligned with each pose from 3I Atlas. Something was answering, and whatever it was enormous. NASA remained silent. The Pentagon classified all new deep space data, but one anonymous insider leaked a single frame of imagery to an astronomy forum, a wide, grainy shot of the outer solar system. In it, you could see a faint arc of light, barely visible, bending around Jupiter's magnetosphere. The label beneath it simply read, "Echo object, confirmed." The world didn't panic. Not yet. Most people still didn't know. But the few who did, the astronomers, the physicists, the engineers, felt the same cold realization sink in. 3I Atlas wasn't just responding. It was coordinating. Every pulse now carried 2 echoes, one toward Earth, one outward toward the edge of the system, and between them, a delay. Exactly 43 minutes. The time it would take light to travel between the 2 points if the other object were real. This wasn't random. It was conversation. Across social media, conspiracy theories exploded again. Some claimed the object was building a wormhole. Others said it was downloading data from every satellite on Earth. But the truth was quieter and more terrifying. It was listening. Radio observatories found that the pulses weren't simply transmitting, they were absorbing reflections of Earth's own broadcasts. Old television signals, military pings, satellite telemetry, everything bouncing off the upper atmosphere was being caught, analyzed, and re-emitted in altered form. Not noise, a mirror. 3I Atlas was playing our own transmissions back to us, delayed, compressed, rearranged. Like an intelligence trying to understand a new language by repeating it aloud. And then, one night, the entire world heard it. Every radio frequency on Earth, from AM stations to shortwave, experienced a simultaneous 3-second interruption. No static, no tone. Just a single faint human-like whisper buried beneath the hum. The word was unclear, but those who slowed it down and filtered the frequencies claimed they heard 3 syllables. We, see, you. Governments denied everything. NASA blamed ionospheric storms. But Loeb and his team already knew the truth. The message wasn't meant to frighten. It was a statement of awareness, recognition. Humanity had been staring into the cosmic dark for centuries. Now, something had stared back. From that moment on, every telescope on Earth pointed at one target. And for the first time in human history, the universe wasn't silent anymore. The climax begins here, not with chaos, but with realization that the object above us isn't just in our system, it's part of it now. By late January, the hum had become background noise. It wasn't just in the radios anymore, it was in the power lines, in the deep-sea fiber cables, even in the ionosphere itself. You could record an empty patch of sky, play it back, and somewhere in the static, you'd hear the rhythm. 7 hours. Every single time. At first, it was fascinating. Then, it became unsettling. And, finally, it became routine. People started sleeping through it. Planes flew, Phones rang, cities glowed, and above it all, something watched quietly. It had become part of life, like gravity. But something was about to change. On February 3rd, the James Webb Space Telescope captured its clearest image yet of 3I Atlas. The photo was supposed to take just 3 minutes. It took 40, not because of a glitch, but because the object itself distorted the space around it. Light didn't behave normally there anymore. It bent, like heat rising from desert sand. When the image finally downloaded, what appeared on NASA's private monitors was indescribable. The object wasn't flat or spherical. It was layered, like a lattice, a complex shell of intersecting arcs, tunnels, and hollow chambers, glowing faintly from within. It wasn't reflecting sunlight, it was emitting something softer, like bioluminescence, a pulse that traveled across its surface in waves, like the heartbeat of something that wasn't supposed to be alive. But that wasn't the part that made everyone in the control room go silent. The inner core deep within the structure showed movement, slow, deliberate, rotational, as if something inside was turning. Loeb described it later as watching a sleeping machine wake up. At the same time, telescopes across the world reported another anomaly. The smaller fragments that had been trailing the object began changing position. One by one, they rearranged themselves into a perfect hexagon, a 6-point formation that mirrored the geometry of Saturn's polar storm. Same proportions, same angular spacing. Perfect. And then, as if coordinated by some invisible conductor, they began to spin. Not around the mothership, but around each other. A synchronized orbit, each one moving at the same speed, like electrons circling an atom. It was beautiful and horrifying, because the pattern wasn't random, it was mathematical. The orbital ratio matched the Fibonacci sequence, nature's blueprint, the same pattern found in DNA, hurricanes, and galaxies. It was as if the universe itself had taught them its most sacred code, and now they were playing it back to us. In the following days, the world started to notice. Social media exploded with grainy night sky footage, glowing dots moving in strange formation, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Some said they were satellites. Others swore they were something else. And then came the sky. On the night of February 7th, auroras erupted across latitudes that had never seen them before. Texas, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, even near the equator. Emerald green curtains rippled across the heavens, shimmering in perfect synchronization with the 7-hour pulse. It wasn't just beautiful, it was coordinated. Scientists called it a geomagnetic storm. But Loeb knew better. He whispered to a colleague, "It's talking through light now." The data confirmed something unprecedented. The magnetic field of Earth had begun resonating not randomly, but harmonically with the same frequency emitted by 3I Atlas. In other words, our planet had become tuned. Every compass needle on Earth began to drift a fraction of a degree, aligning not with magnetic north, but with the direction of the object itself. humanity's oldest navigational tool, now pointed toward the visitor. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, hydrophones used to monitor submarines started recording strange sounds. Long tonal frequencies echoing through the water too structured to be whales, too low to be geological. When translated into sonograms, the shapes looked eerily familiar. Spirals, always spirals. One oceanographer described it best. It's like the planet is humming in harmony with something cosmic. Like we've been drafted into a choir we didn't know existed. And then quietly, without warning, the hum stopped. The first silence in months. No pulses, no flashes, no magnetism. Just quiet. For nearly 12 hours, every instrument across the world went blank. Radio static turned pure. Telescopes showed nothing but stars. Even the auroras vanished. It was as if the entire phenomenon had never existed. Then, at exactly midnight UTC, the hum returned. But it was different, faster, more complex. No longer 7 hours now, every 6 hours and 42 minutes. A shortening interval, a countdown. Every scientist who saw that data felt the same chill. Something was building, something imminent. Within 48 hours, the solar system itself seemed to respond. A strange gravitational ripple, faint but real, passed through Mars, Earth, and Jupiter, shifting orbital positions by a measurable fraction. The effect was subtle, almost undetectable, but it proved one thing. Whatever 3I Atlas was doing, it had begun. Its glow intensified, its formation tightened, and then for the first time, since its discovery, it moved, not drifting, not tumbling, accelerating, directly toward the someday. The last image, captured before the feed went dark, showed it trailing 6 smaller lights behind the same ones that had formed the hexagon, now stretched out like a convoy, each following perfectly in line, leaving a faint, mist-like trail that reflected gold and crimson. Astronomers stared in disbelief. It wasn't falling. It was maneuvering, using the sun's gravity like a slingshot. And if the calculations were correct, it was headed back this way. For the first time in history, every major observatory on Earth locked onto a single moving target. The countdown had begun. The hum continued. The interval kept shrinking, and the message buried in its pulse was about to reach its final form. By mid-February, the solar system had become a stage. Every telescope, every radar, every silent eye pointed toward one actor, the thing we once called a comet. Now, it was no longer 3I Atlas. Scientists had quietly reclassified it. Object 3I, Omega, or simply Omega. The symbol for the end, but it wasn't ending. It was beginning. As Omega accelerated toward the sun, the smaller fragments followed in perfect precision, 6 glowing embers, tethered by invisible geometry, like dancers tracing ancient symbols in the dark. Each left a trail thin, golden, shimmering faintly with static electricity. When mapped, those trails formed a shape not random, not natural, a spiral. The same golden ratio that had appeared in the radial poles, now carved across millions of kilometers of space. An equation so vast that only the void itself could hold it. Astronomers realized, almost in disbelief, that the formation was aligned exactly with Earth's orbit. Every line, every curve timed perfectly so that by March the spiral would complete one full rotation with Earth at its center. It wasn't just traveling through the solar system, it was drawing on it. Solar observatories began detecting electromagnetic turbulence waves of charged particles swirling around Omega's path. It wasn't destructive, but organized. Each burst followed a specific interval, syncing with the hum that still rippled through Earth's ionosphere, like a song being played across planets. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but the data said it clearly. The object was communicating, using the entire solar system as its medium. The sun was the amplifier. The planets were the instruments. We were inside the transmission. Then came the light. On February 21st, observers in South America saw something extraordinary. Just before dawn, the sky shimmered, not with auroras, but with structured light. Bands of faint blue arcs curved across the horizon, each one moving slowly, gracefully, as if drawn by an invisible hand. When analyzed, the arcs weren't random, they matched the positions of Omega's fragments, refracted through the upper atmosphere. For the first time, the message wasn't invisible. It was written in the sky. Meanwhile, the Galileo Project's team received their strangest data yet. Their Massachusetts observatory, equipped with deep-field radar, detected low-frequency returns bouncing not from space but from below the ionosphere. Reflections that came back delayed, distorted, as though Earth itself were echoing the pulse. Something was vibrating inside the planet, matching Omega's rhythm exactly. It was no longer just out there. It was inside our frequency, inside our gravity, inside us. Governments started to break silence. The UN held a closed session, not about contact, but planetary coordination. Behind those walls, reports leaked of military satellites being quietly repurposed, deep space probes reactivated, and nuclear observatories turned outward, not to attack, to listen. Because something or someone was preparing to speak. Around the same time, a strange optical effect was observed. Every night, for exactly 40 seconds, Omega would vanish from visible wavelengths, not fade, vanish. Telescopes recorded nothing but starlight where it should have been. Then, just as suddenly, it would reappear. Those 40 seconds became the most studied silence in human history. Some said it was rotating its dark side, absorbing all light. Others believed it was transmitting its power drawn inward during that brief pause. Loeb had another idea. He compared the pattern to a phenomenon known in astrophysics, a synchronization window when two oscillating systems align perfectly before resonance. If he was right, Omega was aligning with something else, something still hidden. By the 24th, the hum shortened again. Now every 6 hours, each pulse came faster, denser, like a heartbeat approaching its peak. But something was missing. The sound was no longer consistent. Hidden between the waves were fragments, whispers of data, compressed and scattered. When decoded, they formed a pattern of alternating tones, resembling binary 1 second and 0 seconds. But the sequence didn't translate into letters or numbers. It translated into coordinates. The coordinates pointed not to deep space, but to a single spot on Earth. Latitude 20 degrees north, longitude 72 degrees west, the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Right above the mid-Atlantic ridge, a fault line that circles the planet like a scar. The world's focus turned there instantly. Submarines, satellites, oceanic sensors. Every instrument humanity had was pointed at that spot. And then, 2 days later, they found it. A faint shimmer in the deep water. Reflective, moving. Something metallic resting nearly 5 kilometers below the surface. At first, they thought it was debris, maybe a sunken probe or submarine. But sonar revealed something else. It wasn't resting. It was breathing, expanding and contracting by microscopic degrees, in rhythm with the pulse from Omega. It was connected, a twin, a receiver. Avi Loeb stared at the readings in disbelief. "Whatever's up there," he whispered, "has already been down here." That night, across the world, the pulse grew louder, so strong it could be picked up on home speakers, power lines, even electric toothbrushes. Everything that carried a current seemed to hum. Omega was nearing perihelion again, the closest point to the Sunday. Except this time, it wasn't passing through. It was holding position. Then, as if the universe itself inhaled, the hum stopped. Everything went still. The atmosphere fell eerily quiet. Animals froze. Instruments flatlined. The electromagnetic noise of Earth gone. For the first time in centuries, the planet was truly silent. In that silence, one final transmission came through so faint it almost didn't register. A single tone, continuous, perfectly stable, not a pulse, a note. It was the sound of waiting. The countdown had ended. The signal was complete. And the next sound humanity would hear would not be ours. February 29th, a leap day, a day that technically shouldn't exist. And yet, it did perfectly chosen, as if the universe had been saving this exact square of time for something extraordinary. At exactly 0 UTC, all instruments tracking 3I Atlas, now called Omega, recorded the same phenomenon. A total blackout. The object's reflection vanished across every spectrum. Infrared, ultraviolet, radio, X-ray gone. Even the sun's light seemed to dim for a fraction of a second. And then something appeared beneath the Atlantic. The sensors around the mid-Atlantic ridge began to quake, not from seismic activity, but electromagnetic interference. A growing pulse, low and resonant, spread outward like a heartbeat beneath the ocean floor. Satellites above recorded micro-distortions in gravity rippling outward in rings. From space, it looked as though Earth itself had exhaled. Then, From that exact spot in the ocean, a beam of light erupted, thin, pure white, piercing through 5 kilometers of water and shooting straight into the sky. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It simply rose, silently, steadily, connecting the sea to the stars. And somewhere far above Omega answered. For the first time since its discovery, the object responded visually. Its 6 smaller fragments spread out into a wide formation, their lights flickering in a pattern that mirrored the oceanic beam below. Each flash synced perfectly with the pulses coming from the Atlantic. 2 sources, one in heavens, one in the abyss, speaking in unison. NASA's deep space monitors capture the translation. Prime numbers, then Fibonacci sequences, then a repeating geometric progression, a spiral expanding outward. It wasn't just math, it was a key. And when the pattern completed, the beam changed color, from white to deep oceanic blue, then violet, then gold. Everywhere on Earth, magnetic compasses spun wildly. Auroras ignited over every continent at once, even over the equator. The night sky turned alive with light. Cities went dark. Satellites shut down. And yet, no panic. People stepped outside, staring upward, as if pulled by instinct. For the first time in human history, every person who looked at the night sky saw the same thing. A single, enormous spiral of light hovering over Earth, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't an illusion. It was real, projected from above and below the union of sea and space. And at its center, faintly glowing, hung Omega, still, silent, waiting. At that moment, every digital screen, every transmitter, every radio on Earth turned on. Even devices without power sources, phones, televisions, broken radios, pacemakers, car dashboards, all began displaying the same flicker, not an image, a frequency. 7 hertz, the same resonance as the human brain during deep sleep. The world fell into synchronicity. The hum returned no longer mechanical but organic. It carried rhythm, tone, emotion, and then words, not spoken, not heard, felt. Inside every consciousness tuned to it, the same message unfurled not in English or any language, but in meaning, direct and unmistakable, is greater than "we were here before you. We are here again. Do not fear the light." Across the world, people fell silent. Some wept. Some smiled. Some fell to their knees. In that instant, humanity's oldest question, "Are we alone?" evaporated, not with fireworks or conquest, but with calm. The beam faded. The spiral dimmed. And as the light dissolved back into the atmosphere, Omega began to move again. Not away, not toward, but through. It passed behind the sun, as it had months before. Except this time, it didn't emerge on the other side. Every telescope saw the same thing. The object simply vanished. No explosion, no debris, just absence, like a dream fading upon waking. The next morning, power returned, satellites realigned, and the sky, impossibly, was brighter. Astronomers confirmed that the sun's magnetic field had stabilized the largest solar storm in years, had vanished overnight. But the most curious change was here on Earth. Measurements from magnetometers showed a permanent shift, a global alignment offset by 0.04 degrees, all pointing toward the same direction in space. The coordinates matched the exact path Omega had taken before it disappeared. Avi Loeb released one final statement to the press. "Is greater than, if this was technology, it wasn't ours. If it was life, it wasn't born here. But whatever it was, it left something behind." Weeks later, deep-sea drones exploring the mid-Atlantic ridge found something extraordinary. At the same coordinates of the light beam, resting on the seabed, was a smooth, circular impression, perfectly symmetrical, 50 meters wide and metallic. No structure, no debris, just an imprint, still faintly warm to the touch. Inside the circle, the water shimmered unnaturally, particles suspended as if magnetized. When they illuminated it with lasers, the reflection produced the same pattern that had once filled the sky, a golden spiral spinning endlessly. The message hadn't ended. It had anchored. By April, the hum was gone. Silence again. But not emptiness. A quiet understanding settled over the world. The night sky was still the same, and yet it wasn't. Every star looked closer. Every silence felt like a conversation waiting to resume. We had looked into the dark and been looked at in return. And though Omega was gone, something of it remained inside the ocean, inside the field lines of the Earth, and maybe even inside us. Because the truth wasn't that they had arrived, it was that they had returned. When people asked Loeb what he thought it all meant, he smiled faintly and said, "It's greater than, maybe the universe isn't empty. Maybe it's just patient. And somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system, in the direction every compass now points, something flickered. Once, then again, a pulse. 7 hours apart." The conversation had only just begun. The world never officially declared what happened that night. There were no headlines saying contact made, no emergency broadcasts, no flashing warning. Just silence, deliberate, respectful, uneasy. Governments classified their data. Space agencies called it a plasma mirage. And news anchors read from scripts that sounded rehearsed. But people remembered. They remembered the sky glowing gold. They remembered the hum in their bone. And they remembered the words, "We were here before you." Months passed. Spring came quietly that year. Bird migrations changed slightly. Plants began blooming earlier, as if time itself had bent just a little. Some said it was climate change. Others whispered about something else, that maybe Earth had absorbed a fragment of whatever Omega truly was. Fishermen near the Atlantic ridge started reporting strange lights beneath the water, faint, soft glows that pulsed every 7 hours. Sometimes blue, sometimes green, always rhythmic. And if you listen closely, the sound beneath the waves was no longer just the ocean. It was the same low frequency that once filled the sky, but gentler now, like a heartbeat at rest. In observatories across the world, scientists began to notice a subtle, inexplicable pattern. Radio noise, the random static that fills the background of the cosmos, wasn't random anymore. It carried faint mathematical precision, small sequences repeating deep inside the static. A code too faint to hear, too complex to decode, but undeniably there. Every time they traced the source, it came from the same direction, the same part of the sky where 3I Atlas had vanished, a region now nicknamed the Quiet Sector. No natural radio sources, no pulsars, just a silence except for the faint whisper that repeats every 7 hours, 32 minutes, and 6 seconds. A perfect echo of the old hum, adjusted slightly, as if the signal was evolving, learning, waiting. If you're still here, listening under the same sky that once glowed gold, take a breath, look up, because in the silence between the stars, someone may be looking back, and when the next hum begins, we'll know what it means. If this story moved you, remember the next chapter might already be written in the stars. Don't miss it. Subscribe now and stay until the next signal reaches us.